Hello, everybody. Welcome to Boots, Beers, and Bowls. I just want to say, as somebody who was born in this city and grew up in this state, when I was growing up, when we thought of Boots, we thought of cowboys in Texas. When we thought of Bulls, we thought of basketball players from Chicago. But when we thought of beer, we knew Milwaukee was the center of the world. So you're in the right place. Let me just say briefly, it is an honor to be here with the Bastion Institute, the Polaris National Security Institute, with the 21st Century Policy Institute, and with three of the great members of the United States Senate, Senators Ernst, Graham, and Haggerty. And before I turn it over to our moderator, let me just say I was asked to just say one word about why Microsoft is here. We are here because we are based in the United States, but we do business around the world. And we know that every day, the United States represents 4.5% of the world's people. And we know, as Senator Ernst often says, the key to success is America first, but never alone. And we know that we live in a country that declared its independence by itself, but won its independence with our first ally, France. And we have the French ambassador here today. And we know that even after shedding American blood in 2 wars, we secured the peace, not by ourselves, but together with the countries of the European Union. And the ambassador from the EU is here. And we, every year and every decade, have worked with our staunch ally across the Pacific, Australia, where we have the former Prime Minister and ambassador here. So every day, it is American allies working with the United States that make America a stronger country. So with that, let me turn it over to the founder of the founder of Polaris National Security, who you may know as the host of the Morgan Ortagus radio show. Guess who the host is? It's Morgan Ortagus. Here she is.
Hello, Milwaukee. Hello. Can I get a mega? What an exciting week. It's so hard to believe that just a few days ago, there was an assassination attempt on the former president of the United States, but he is here and he is ready to win in November. How about you? I think most of you know me because I texted personally almost 3/4 of you and asked you to come to this event. Thank you for coming. We've got boots. We brought Nashville to Milwaukee. We've got a lot of beer, and we have a mechanical bull. So cheer loudly if you want Lindsey Graham on the mechanical bull. We are going to have a lot of fun, but first we're going to have a national security discussion. I'm going to bring the senators to the stage. I'm so excited to have all of them. So without further ado, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Joni Ernst, and Senator Bill Haggerty. All right. Oh, my law's working. Okay, here we go. All right, we're going to jump right into this. I promise you that the open bar will be here as soon as we do this quick national security discussion. I'm going to start with the senior senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. You know, one of the things that you and I spoke about over the weekend, immediately after the assassination attempt of former President Trump, was the fact that there have been active plots by the Iranian regime on U.S. soil to not only kill President Trump, but Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, my boss, Ryan Cook, and other administration officials. How in the world are we giving billions of dollars in sanctions relief to a regime that is plotting to kill former administration officials?
Because we're stupid. So, we've lost deterrence. It all started with Afghanistan, right? When we pulled out of Afghanistan, I think Russia said, there's an opening here, I'm going to take it, to your detriment. The Iranians are running wild. They were getting 300,000 barrels a day of oil produced when President Trump left. They're over 1 million today. So I was playing golf with Brian Hook when I heard about President Trump being shot. The administration, I want to work with where I can, but they misunderstand the Ayatollah. He is not a normal person. This is not a normal regime. They have a religious desire to reshape the world in the image of their version of Islam. They want to kill all the Jews and they want to come after you. And if you don't get that, you're making the same mistake they did in the 30s with Hitler. The guy's a nut. So here's what we got to do. We got to scare the hell out of him quickly. So Bill's got to leave. I'm going to turn it over. One word about Polaris. If you're a Republican running for Congress and you got a car dealership, you probably know a lot about cars. If you want to know about the gun rights, the NRA will show up and tell you everything you need to know about Second Amendment. If you want to understand the pro-life movement, they'll be there. If you want to know about the Artichoke Association, somebody will be there. But nobody shows up about national security. We're going to fix that. Now, how do you become an isolationist party when people don't know what the right answer is? So Polaris is about informing people who are going to want to serve about the JCPOA is not a life insurance company. That NATO needs to pay more, and Ukraine matters, and Taiwan matters, and if you don't get Ukraine right, there goes Taiwan. And if you don't have a bigger Navy, you're giving everything over to the Chinese. So we're going to have an organization through Morgan and her team to educate people about America first doesn't mean America alone. America first means people should fear us, not take advantage of us. If we do not educate candidates for office about what national security is all about, we have nobody to blame but ourselves, to Brad and to corporate America. If you want people to vote for defense budgets we need, you better educate them as to why we need a bigger military. And say no to all the so-called deficit hawks who would dismantle the military in the name of balancing the budget. You're not making America safer by balancing the budget on the back of the Defense Department. Polaris is needed now more than ever. This is the 1930s all over again, but we're not going to let it happen again.
Yeah. Senator Joe Naderance, we know that energy security is national security. You and I talked about how dangerous it was for the administration to stop LNG exports, that announcement earlier this year. Tie it in for us why it matters that Iran is effectively getting billions of dollars in sanctions relief and still able to export their energy.
Absolutely, Morgan. And thanks for everybody for coming out for this event. It is extremely important that we are sharing our perspective. And Brad, I do say it all the time, America first, but never America alone. Okay, so never America alone. We can tie it all together because we do have sanctions against Iran. But guess what? This president refuses to enforce those sanctions against Iran. Our Department of Homeland Security investigations knows full well what tankers are traversing across the oceans that are carrying Iranian oil. And yet our Department of Justice refuses to interdict those tankers. As a result of our failure to enforce our very own sanctions, Iran has now seen over $80 billion of oil revenues go into their coffers. So what happens then when we see that oil revenue go up for Iran is they take those dollars and they disperse them. And they disperse them in a way that is harmful, not just to our friends and neighbors across the Middle East, but also harmful to us as a United States of America. So Iran is funding the Houthis, they're funding Hezbollah, they're funding the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. You can see that those organizations really are a detriment to the United States of America. So there are a number of us in Congress that are pushing the president to enforce sanctions and actually go after the oil that can be intercepted. And I have a bill, Lindsay, I mean, we all work on various bills, but I have a bill that would take that oil revenue as we sell it from the United States and fill the coffers once again for a fund that will allow the survivors and those that have been victimized by these terrorist organizations, allow them to be repaid. So we've got to stay on this, Morgan. Energy security is important here in the United States of America. I believe in all of the above energy. I think most of us do. But only when we retain that energy dominance and push back against our adversaries will we be strong yet once again. So very excited about the opportunity with President Trump.
Thank you. Senator Hagerty. Senator Hagerty, as we just stay on the Middle East, how does the Abraham Accords tie into all of this as it relates to countering Iran? And what if President Trump is reelected in November, as we all here think that he will be? How do you move the Abraham Accords forward and get more countries involved?
Well, I think it gets back to the topic that we just mentioned, and that is Iran. How are the Abraham Accords possible? Well, it's because President Trump withdrew us from the JCPOA. You recall the deal that got us there under President Obama, the pallets of cash that came to Iran. We all saw that. That funded terror throughout the region. By implementing secondary sanctions, that's not just primary sanctions between the United States and Iran. We don't buy much from them. But secondary sanctions, just like I worked to implement in Japan when I was ambassador there, going to the Japanese and saying, look, you can do business with Iran, you can do business with the United States, but you cannot do business with us both. That was hard to accomplish, but we did it. Around the world, we did that, and we choked down Iran. They were broke, and guess what? Peace breaks out in the region. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis are broke. You think about what happened. We moved our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. We acknowledge Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, no more. And the Abraham Accords, I think, were the crowning achievement that everybody said could not be done. But what we were able to do in that environment is focus on prosperity and peace through prosperity. And without Iran able to jeopardize that, we had a runway open for us to see something magnificent that had never happened before and most people thought could not be done. What happens if President Trump comes back into office? And I feel very strongly he will come back into office.
Yes.
What happens? We get back to a posture of peace to restraint. And the Abraham Accords, I think the possibilities are, extremely robust, that we can see that expand dramatically. Here's the basic premise. President Trump comes back into office, we focus back on our economic strength. It's our energy independence, our ability to become the best strategic partner in the world with respect to energy. It's getting the regulatory sclerosis out of the system and pushing back on these bureaucracies that are doing everything they can to constrain America's economy. A strong economy will begin to support a strong military, and with a strong military not focused on pronouns but on lethality, we will be able to come back to a position of strong diplomacy.
That's right. Thank you. Didn't get it. All right. I'm getting double microphone today. Senator Ernst, you and I have been to the southern border together. We know that our southern border and the over 11 million illegal crossings is the #1 national security issue on the minds of voters and what matters today. I think we are all concerned, as the FBI director has testified multiple times in front of the three of you, that there's blinking and flashing red lights. So what do we do after 11 million people have come in? How do we go back to protecting our borders again?
Well, this is an issue that on day one, I believe that President Trump will resolve, just as he had resolved it in the last administration. Day one of the Biden administration, the president threw open the doors to the United States of America and basically encouraged illegal migration into the country. So Morgan, you're right. We've got over 11 million people that have come into the country. Many of them now don't even have court dates to have asylum hearings any longer. They've been told, we'll call you when we have an opening. Many of those that do get court dates, it's 10 years in the future. So it is a national security risk for us to continue to allow people to flow over the border. Just in this last year, we have seen over 170 individuals on the terrorist watch list that have been apprehended at our southern border. That's got to stop. We have seen where 6 individuals were from the Middle East were apprehended. Tajikistan. How many know where Tajikistan is? Okay, yes, there are a few of you. Thank you. These are the people that should know. They should know. But those 6 came in and they have known affiliations or ties to ISIS. So this is a real issue. As we study the different information that flows out from our intelligence agencies and that's fed to all of us that serve in Congress, we know that ISIS wants to have attacks on our homeland. How better to do it than to send somebody over the southern border where they are unchecked and they're turned loose into the interior. So other issues that exist out there. Senator Chuck Grassley, my senior senator from the great state of Iowa, he and Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, they held a joint hearing on the unaccompanied minors that are now being released to those here in the United States that have known ties to the drug cartels. We know full well they're being used for child labor. Those unaccompanied children are being used for sex trafficking. And yet this president allows them to be turned over to those organizations. Why? Because they don't have room to hold them anywhere else. So they know that there's 85,000 minors that can't be tracked down. What do we do about it? We re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy that President Trump had worked out with Mexican authorities. We shut down the borders and require that everyone go through a port of entry, or we're just simply going to boot your you-know-what out of the country. I mean, that needs to happen. So there are so many easy ways that we can do this, but then don't fund them when they come into the country. Make sure that if they are applying legally, that they're able to support themselves, and don't encourage them by saying, you know what, we're going to allow you to vote in state and local elections. There are so many things that we can do that need to be done, and Donald J. Trump is going to do it.
That's right. Senator Hagerty, I think you had a follow-up.
I'd just like to say the quiet part out loud on this one. You talk about our southern border. At Biden's encouragement for people to surge that southern border, Biden promised to transform America. Here's what's happening. Here is the motive behind the crime right now. Those illegal migrants are counted in the census for the purpose of allocating congressional districts and electoral votes. My colleagues, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Joni Ernst, joined me. We voted to stop doing that, to stop allowing these people to be counted for the purposes of allocating electoral power in the United States. Every single Democrat voted to continue doing it. This is the motive behind the crime at the southern border. What's the motive behind not enforcing oil sales to Iran? Well, one, to appease them, but the other is to try to hold down energy prices, because this administration decided on day one, yet again, to wage war on the domestic energy industry here in America. They flatlined our production when we should be going through the roof right now. This is all about domestic politics at the end of the day, and we have a party that is so power mad that they're willing to subject us to the dangers that Joni just described because they want electoral power. They want to appease the wild-eyed environmentalists who think that we just got to kill domestic industry. All of this weakens America, yet they're willing to do it. Things have to change, and they will change in November.
Thank you.
No, not you. How many of you believe that we need rational immigration? That we need merit-based immigration? That we need to pick the best and brightest from the entire world and have them come here work on our terms? How many of you believe that we need H-1B workers, people to harvest the crops? I do. So I have been working on this problem for 20 years. The big loss from this open border policy, waving everybody in, is a guy like me cannot convince any Republican to do immigration reform until we first secure our border. So Joe Biden has made it impossible to modernize our immigration system through a comprehensive approach. What does President Trump have to do? Deport people, or they will keep coming. What will slow down the inflow is when people see folks leaving. So number one, you got to secure your border, but you got to deport people who have been here a very short period of time and start getting them out to slow down the flow. Between Afghanistan and a broken border, I've never been more worried about a 9/11 than I am right now. This is a lethal cocktail. It's the number one issue. But I want to tell everybody in here, the need for immigration reform hasn't gone away. If we can't find a way to supplement our workforce down the road, you know, I'm 69, not married with no kids, I'm the problem. We're a declining population. We're going to need rational immigration. We're going to need good people from all over the world to come here and help grow our economy. No American should lose their job, but when your American company can't find an American worker after looking, let's bring people in to make it a win-win. That has always been my goal. And if we don't get immigration right, our economy is going to hit a wall. Because without a viable workforce, you can't grow the economy. If you've been to a meatpacking plant, you know there are a lot of Hispanic people there. If you've been out on a construction crew, if you know that our economy depends on growing labor. You can't find people to work. So let's supplement our labor supply rationally. Let's make America a place where you can come and be welcomed on our terms. Learn our language. And if you commit a crime, off you go. That's what we've lost from this chaos. And that breaks my heart. And one last thing about Iran. Sanctions are not working. Here's my idea. If you're China, India, or Russia, and you buy oil from Iran at cheap prices to help your economy and fund terrorism, we will put tariffs on all your products coming into the United States, not sanctions. You got to pick between our economy and their cheap oil. It's time to put tariffs on these countries that are fueling terrorism. A terrorism tariff.
All right. Senator Haggerty, we're going to pivot to Asia as we always try to do. In the United States of America, you were a prolific ambassador for President Trump to Japan, negotiated bilateral trade agreements, negotiated our basing for our houses, our basing for our troops in Japan. You speak Japanese. You've been all over the region as a businessman and now a senator. Give us your perspective on where we are in this moment when we're worried about the threat of the Chinese Communist Party towards Taiwan, when we're worried about the second Thomas Shoal in the Philippines, and we're worried about the very essence of freedom of navigation around the world for our U.S. Navy. How do we tackle this massive China challenge with so many setbacks in front of us?
Well, thank you for that question, Morgan. I've got two of the best colleagues I could possibly have in this because we need a strong military to address the challenge. When I arrived back in Japan in 2017, we had to overcome a policy that was known as leading from behind. Dealing with North Korea with the term called strategic patience. Do any of you have teenagers? Do you know what strategic patience would lead to?
I have a toddler.
It's unbelievable. So North Korea had ramped up in the 10 months of October that I had data for, from January to October. I remember sitting down with President Trump showing him this. They'd done more missile tests and nuclear tests in those 10 months than they'd done in the 14 years prior. I mean, that place was hot. When I arrived, the North Koreans were threatening. In fact, they launched intercontinental ballistic missiles over Japan. The area was an extremely tough position. Look at what happened. We began to lead for strength. President Trump, Prime Minister Abe locked arms. We imposed 3 consecutively stronger sets of economic sanctions on North Korea. And guess what? China and Russia actually agreed. We got our assets in the right place out there. I remember Mark Milley, when he was Chief of Staff of the Army, coming out to see me. We talked about it. I asked him about the timeline. Sure enough, when we got everything where it needed to be, things began to calm down. My butt bigger than yours? No, that wasn't the conversation. When can we get together and negotiate? I think about what happened with the PLA. In the East China Sea, they had been harassing the Senkaku Islands. This calms down. The South China Sea, you remember back in 2015 when Xi Jinping comes to the Rose Garden standing shoulder to shoulder with Barack Obama and saying, oh, we have no intention of militarizing these islands that we're building in the South China Sea. By the time I got there, Morgan, in 2017, they were completely militarized. Turrets, runways, you name it.
Exactly.
We have to push back. Ambassador Rudd, you know this. You've been following China forever. This is something that I've been dealing with for years. As a business person, I was optimistic back in 2001. I thought, expose them to a market economy. We've done so well with it, perhaps things would change. They use predatory practices, whether it be stealing intellectual property, heavily subsidizing their industries, not allowing us access to their markets. They don't play by the same set of rules economically. They clearly don't play by the same set of rules militarily. Look at the cyber warfare that they engage on every day. We have to stand up to China. The only thing they understand is strength. Words and press releases do not work. You do not let them fly a flippant spy balloon over the United States of America without consequence. So we will be back to dealing from a position of strength immediately. Xi Jinping knows Donald Trump. This will be a different ballgame. We have to implement it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Senator Ernst, as I see so many of our friends, foreign ambassadors that are here from Asia, Europe, Middle East, all over, one of the things that I think is, as it relates to the threat of the Chinese Communist Party, this geopolitical competition that the U.S. is in, we cannot take on this challenge alone. So what should the Trump administration do if we hopefully win in November? How do we engage with our allies, not only in Asia, but also around the world, to protect the freedom-loving nation that we know and love?
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. And this is where we see our organizations, whether it's Polaris, the Bastion Institute, whether it's 21st Century, all of these organizations are here for the good of the United States of America. It is incredibly important that the United States lead. And in order to lead, you have to have someone that will inspire others to follow. That's the key to leadership, is inspiration. And right now, we do not have someone who is inspiring others to follow. Joe Biden has been very, very weak on this stage. When we have Donald Trump, once again, he can inspire others to follow. So when I think about American leadership and our friends and allies around the world, and what I will encourage President Trump to do is really embrace our friends and allies. Now, again, going back to America first, but never America alone, we need to know how to work with our friends and allies, leverage all of the abilities of all of these incredible nations and partnerships for the good of everyone. It doesn't mean that the United States need to deploy all of our troops forward at every moment, but certainly having individuals out in other nations, a handful of special operators working with our friends and allies around the globe is extremely important. It provides leadership. It provides stability. This is what we need. But we also need to leverage our alliances when it comes to trade, when it comes to the energy sector. All of those areas need to be used for the betterment not only of the United States, but for our friends and partners as well. Again, Joe Biden is extremely weak right now. And in the face of adversity, we have seen Joe Biden turn tail and abandon our friends and allies. We saw this in Afghanistan, where we saw the absolute debacle of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, where we left behind not just our friends and allies, unbeknownst to them, the United States was pulling out, but we left our Afghan friends, those that had worked with our American military. We left Americans in Afghanistan, and they're still not out of the country. Then we turned to Ukraine. What did we see in Ukraine? We were working in Ukraine with special operators training Ukrainian military units. The minute that Putin started building up on the border of Ukraine, President Biden said, let's withdraw American troops from Ukraine. And what happened? We had a minor incursion, which President Biden said would be okay. That minor incursion turned into a war that has lasted now over 2 years. So we have got to learn to step up and enable our friends and partners to defend their own borders. But it does take American commitment to do that. So we need to lead, and President Trump is going to be that inspirational leader that's needed once again. Now, this will come after we rebuild our own military. We need that. We know we're facing recruitment challenges. We know that we need to inspire, once again, young men and women to serve. But we should be good friends and allies to all of our partners.
Senator Graham, I know that you have talked quite a bit about what Senator Hagerty and Ernst have just talked about rebuilding the military, but I think it's not only important just to rebuild our military, but also our defense industrial base and to rebuild our Navy. We need to be able to actually build the submarines that we promised Australia and in AUKUS. So why don't you talk a bit about that?
Well, as an Air Force guy, it pains me to say this, but we need a bigger Navy. And that's hard for me to say.
The Admiral likes that.
Yeah. So, if you want to do well in Asia, you better get Ukraine right. So this idea, you can give away Ukraine and we're going to be safer, doesn't work that way. So the best thing you can do for China is to show up in Africa and compete everywhere. So how many ships do we have in the Navy?
Not enough. Yeah.
298. At the end of the decade, how many we're going to have? 299. We're spending below inflation on the United States Navy. China's going to have 450 ships. This bipartisan budget deal, which I voted against, puts us below inflation for our military writ large. I think the threats are beyond that. So how do you rebuild the Navy? You come up with a plan. You work with South Korea and Japan that actually have shipyards. And you do for Navy building what you did for submarines with our friends in Australia. You get allies together that have capability. You have a joint goal of establishing an industrial base, and it doesn't all have to be here, to get on with building a bigger Navy so China will take you seriously. One of the first things we did wrong was take tactical nuclear weapons out of submarines in the backyard of China. Does anybody remember Ronald Reagan? I was in the Air Force in 1984 to 88 in Europe. When Ronald Reagan introduced nuclear-tipped cruise missiles, he told the Russians, I'm not going to match you tank for tank, but if you come through the Fulda Gap, you will regret it. China has to believe we will fight for Taiwan. China has to believe that we have the capability to take the fight to China. It all goes back to the lack of deterrence. Trump told me one time, go tell this guy I'm a little crazy. I said it'd be the easiest job you ever get. People were afraid of him. It was not just sanctions. Soleimani is dead. That's why you get people wanting to sign up with Trump. Yeah, sign me up. I like that guy. I want to be on your side. We've lost all that. So we got to have a plan to rebuild the Navy. It's got to be beyond the top line of the budget. If we don't have an emergency kind of appropriations attitude to rebuild the Navy, we're giving China the wrong signal. Here's what I told Trump. I want you to be Teddy Roosevelt. Talk softly and carry a big stick. I want you to rebuild the Navy in a way that will be credible. I want you to make it fun to be back in the military again. I want to make our allies feel like we do have you back. And I'll end where I began. I want to end this war in Ukraine. It's going to be a diplomatic solution. But if Putin is seen as being rewarded for dismembering Ukraine, China will get the wrong signal. If we're weak in Ukraine, Iran believes we're all talk when it comes to stopping their nuclear program. So I am hoping that President Trump will give an offer to Putin he can't refuse and tell Putin, if you don't want to solve this, then I'll give Ukraine all the weapons they need. And this thing will keep going and going and going. It's going to take a guy like President Trump to bring this war to an end honorably. The people in Ukraine have fought like tigers. Your fight is our fight. Your fate is our fate. To think otherwise is just not realistic. This is the 1930s all over again. If you could go back in time and do something different with Hitler, would you take the opportunity? We had a chance 10 times to stop him. So we got the ambassador from Israel. Everywhere you look, somebody wants to cut your throat. You know what? Everybody wants to cut your throat, wants to cut my throat. Give you the bombs you need to win the war you can't afford to lose. That's how you help beat China.
Senator Haggerty, I know you have to go. You leave a few minutes early to get on television, so we'll go to you. You've spent a lot of time with President Trump as his ambassador, and in some of the most intense negotiations in the Trump administration took place under your watch as ambassador to Japan. So I'm wondering, two-part question. Could you give us some insights on what it's like to negotiate for President Trump, what we should expect over the next 4 years? And I also, as you said, want to give you a chance to talk about how we help Israel decimate and end Hamas and Hezbollah once and for all.
So on the first question, I could spend the entire afternoon with you about what it's like to negotiate with President Trump and on his behalf. Lindsay's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I'll say this. When you have a president that has your back, when they know that there will be real consequences to inaction, you get action. And we were able to deliver action. We were able to deliver real results at every turn because of two things. One, inaction was going to be an unacceptable answer. And two, they knew if we said yes, that we're going to create something insurmountable, strong and defensible. There's a reward for working with America. We need to make that clear. I'd like to add one point given the audience here today. The diplomats that are here in this room are here because they are the best diplomats in their nation. They would not be assigned to Washington, D.C. if they weren't. You all are going to help us in a new administration forge the strongest alliances possible. I want you to look for economic opportunities because, again, to me, that is the foundation. We're going to be talking a lot if President Trump comes back into office, and I think he will, about trade, about stronger capital flows. We need to be looking at opportunities to rearrange our supply chains to strengthen our nations together. And back to what was said at the outset, we're not talking about doing it alone. We're talking about doing it with our friends in the strongest manner possible. Every one of you diplomats that are here can take a principal role in helping us do this. With respect to Israel, I cannot tell you how disappointed I am in this administration. The two-state solution that Joe Biden is working on are Michigan and Minnesota. This both-sidism doesn't work. He came out and said the right things at the outset. He said what I believe the vast majority of Americans feel. We support Israel. We stand behind them. I'm from the southern part of the United States. We love Israel. We love our Jewish friends and brothers here in America. I was shocked at what I've seen. The anti-Semitism that I've seen in certain areas is heartbreaking to me, and it's frankly quite embarrassing. Ambassador, we've had this conversation. It's got to stop. But this White House needs to send a clear message. I can guarantee you this, if there's a change, there will be. The way to deal with this is to allow Israel to do the job it can do. Take Hamas out of business. Get our hostages back. End this. And then find the grounds to create prosperity again. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you, sir. Sounds like somebody that should be, a senior diplomat of the United States or something like that. Okay. Senator Ernst, and Senator Graham, tonight is at the convention. We are focused on national security and foreign policy. That never happens, by the way, at Republican conventions, right? Foreign policy is never the forefront at a convention unless things are going really bad. So just to end this, because I know y'all want to hear some country music, but to end this, Senator Ernst, we'll start with you. Tonight's National Security and Foreign Policy Night. What do you want to hear most tonight, and what are you most concerned about? Why are the stakes so high in this election as it relates to our national security?
Thank you, Morgan, and I want to thank you as well for your service in uniform. So thank you so much.
The Navy never looked better.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So this evening is very important, and we do need to hear from those that are speaking on stage on our role as the United States of America, how we not only provide for our own national security, and that means rebuilding the military, rebuilding our defense industrial base, making sure we're inspiring future generations to serve in uniform so that we can protect our nation. It means securing our southern border to protect us against threats to the homeland. But it also means the outreach that we do with other nations as well. Again, I just keep hammering it. America first, but not America alone. We have such great partners. Hell yeah. Okay, we've got all these wonderful, incredible partners here from our diplomatic corps. We were joined by Ambassador Herzog. We've got Dame Karen, thank you very much, from the UK. We've got everyone. We are represented all the way around the globe with all of these incredible diplomats. But it means working not only through diplomacy, which should always be our first step in making America much more secure, but also then a secondary step when negotiations fail is to work through our military. It doesn't mean deploying forward our military all the time, but again, a handful of advisors, of leaders working with foreign militaries to strengthen their own resources. We do this quite well. Those mill-to-mill partnerships, very, very important, something that we need to capitalize on. I hope to hear more about all of those ways to strengthen and protect the United States of America.
That's-
All right.
Senator Graham, what do you want to hear tonight?
Well, number one, I like the idea of beautiful women who want to kill terrorists to be more in charge of the world. So, Johnny, Morgan, Katie Britt, Nikki, I mean, we got a cadre of really strong national security women, and I want to build on that. So that's what Polaris and your group's all about. We're going to hear mixed messages tonight. You can listen to Tucker, I probably won't. But that's okay. He has a worldview, I have mine. There'll be different voices coming out tonight. You got to wonder, well, what does that all mean? To the diplomats here, the speeches are not as important as the man, Donald Trump. The best thing you can understand about Trump is what he did before he'll do again. There was a reason we didn't have any wars on his watch. He built up the military and he did not want to use it unless he had to. He wanted economic relationships that were beneficial, but if you were cheating America, you're going to pay a price. More of the same. He's got two conflicts on his hands that we got to get right. To our friends in Israel, we got to let Iran know if Hezbollah comes after you from the north, we're going not just to Beirut, but to Iran. Remember when John Kennedy said an attack from Cuba would be considered an attack from the Soviet Union? There's an effort to overwhelm Iron Dome. I'm hoping we're telling the Iranians you're going to be held responsible. As to Ukraine, we all want to end this war. We all know it won't end on the battlefield. I'm a realist, but I want Ukraine to be still standing as a vibrant democracy. I want them eventually to be in NATO and the EU. I don't want a third invasion. If we could go back in 2014, what would we do differently? We would do more than we did. So President Trump's got a chance to reset the world. The speeches will be a mixed bag tonight, but here's what I think he'll do when it comes to the Ukraine. He'll get you a good deal. He'll give Putin choices, but he's not going to abandon you. When it comes to Israel, he's going to reestablish deterrence against the great Satan Iran pretty quickly. He will be pushing, building on the Abraham Accords. He will be rebuilding our military. He will be telling those who want to cheat us in trade, you're going to pay a price. I think he'll put tariffs on countries that buy oil from Iran. I think he'll secure our border, but I hope he'll also talk about rebuilding a broken immigration system. Everything that's going wrong today has one commonality. Nobody fears us and nobody respects us. It all started with Afghanistan. You can fix this pretty quickly, and let me tell you why. America should be considered a good partner, but people should fear us who are up to no good. I promise you, I've been in rooms. I've seen the look on their faces. Donald Trump is going to reestablish American dominance, not just in energy, but on the world stage peacefully.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out to listen to this national security debate discussion amongst the Republican Party.